now I'm going to be using my voice as a kind of formant synthesizer. So all of the blowing, singing, talking, everything will be to modulate the synthesis. You see? It's like, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I'm just gonna set this on the ground right here.
Cool.
So I really like the topic of the English language because I struggle with it a lot in the translation.
Next thing, I just want you to, since we're gonna silhouette him, I'm just gonna have to turn your chair a little bit more towards him, so I can get you in this back window.
Alright.
Perfect.
Cool.
Just
So
like that.
I'm just gonna explain to Onyx the idea of this silhouette.
Okay.
So it took me a long time to decide to make this film because of the ethnographic nature of like film, which I kind of struggle with because I come from a place whereby people come from everywhere. They want to film what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's a very difficult relationship that I have with that. So the method I'm using for this film is I'm using silhouettes of people. It's obvious people will know who Onyx is because especially people in this area will know because of your work. But what I'm trying to do is to register my discontent with the idea, the media, the ethnographic aspect of the media.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm holding back something,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit, you know, because I know there are people who will see the film and they say, oh, yeah, we've never been to Detroit, but oh, this is Detroit, you know, and they already have an idea of how the people of Detroit are. So I'm holding back some information. So most of the videos are either silhouettes or they are partly obscured. Just enough to know who the person is, but you don't get everything. You just get a little bit.
Yes.
You know. And also I do a lot of work in Ann Arbor. That itself is problematic for me because people from Ann Arbor, especially in my circle, they don't want to come here. But they would rather have a black person come into Detroit and tell them what's happening in Detroit because they feel like, oh, it's still a dangerous place. So I'm struggling with a lot of things in terms of principles, you know, of how to present this thing. So holding back some information and some detail is one of the ways that I'm looking at, you know. So this is going to be more of a silhouette of you talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mind if I point that lamp at the back of your chair?
Fine. Let me just get mine. I'll get all this stuff out. All this stuff out of the way before we get started.
And then you could scoot back in your chair just like half a foot.
How's that?
Cool.
Hey, wait, Jeff.
Careful on your phone.
Sorry.
Okay. We're good now.
I love you.
Yeah, those are getting replaced this week too.
Are they going to be part of the interaction?
Well, see, now I look at the interaction as a side effect,
Good to go. Whenever you're ready.
as a side effect of just kind of of an exploration. So it's like rather, you know. So now I look at it as what I've felt in the last few weeks of wearing these more continuously is that the hands are very the hands say a lot, maybe more than the mouth,
I see.
right? And so I had a theory that giving them something fun to do, that they would do it, and I wouldn't have to actually think about it. It would be something that they would automatically know how to do, right? So now it's like the shoes, like this is it's so comfortable that increasingly I don't have to take it off. I take it off now because see, this is bulky. I love it.
Right.
I love it. I designed it to be cool. I mean, like cool, I won't get. It's not like if I'm in the sun and it's hot,
Yeah.
I'm not sweating because of it.
I see.
So I designed it for that. So it's comfortable-ish, but it's, it was a stage. And so the next stage is more in the direction of comfort and, the data has to be able to be conveyed reliably, but if I'm not comfortable, then the data is not valid or less valid. So that means being comfortable physically, but also being comfortable socially. What does it mean, to wear a completely 3D printed body wear system and integrate somehow, So on the topic of resistance, it's like I don't think about resistance anymore except as an electrical term. So I see it as a necessity for a circuit to be valid, but not as a life concept. It's like, I feel like if looking at it as an electric circuit, taking, playing with whatever abstraction of resistance, but also playing with the abstraction of capacitance in that sense. Like, what's the optimal state? What is the opposite of resistance? What is this optimal thing that can be explored as well? And then now I have a spectrum that I can play around in. I'm resisting a certain set of variables over here. I am drawn towards a certain set of variables over here. What is the space in between? And it's not just trying to get as quickly from here to here. It's like, computers don't do that. Computers take electricity, route them a bazillion different ways, and then you get to play around with that routing and do things like this. So I look at that, I look at this social machine as the same type of thing. There are many types of interactions with the variables that govern all of this that haven't been played with yet because they're still too stuck into linguistic constructs rather than cymatic or electrical or, constructs that can still produce architecture and art and all of these other things, but aren't hindered by the programmatic nature of the language used to create them, namely English.
Yeah. On that topic, I like your take on the English language as a programming language. You want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the English language is interesting. It has embedded Fibonacci values in it. See, the Fibonacci sequence is kind of the math of nature, right? If you look at phenomena that happen in nature, they usually follow this sequence of you take a number and then you add it to the previous number in the sequence. So if you have no previous number, then you're just at 0. So the next number would be 1 in this integer chain. So 1, and 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13, 21, 34. And you keep going and it keeps building in this exponential way, right? And so the alphabet has 5 vowels, which are actually the most important pieces. They're the thing that words don't work without, unless they're just some type of acronym of some sort. So between A and E is 3 letters. E and I is 3 letters. I and O is 5 letters. O and U is 5 letters, and U and to the end of the alphabet is 5 letters. So that's 2 3s and 3 5s. Now, I don't really think about what's true or not. I don't care, because what's true might not be all that useful. What's interesting and what's useful. So, finding these patterns in the English alphabet, to me, is an interesting pattern to explore, because it implies that there is probably a kind of mathematical and or rhythmic subsystem of the English language that is that no one speaks about, right? So it's interesting to play with that, you know. So I assign, I make each vowel a golden ratio value from the other vowels, and then I subdivide in between, and the resulting right now it's I don't know, it's not really working the way I want right now, so I can't demonstrate it, but I mean I have it, but I'll be working on it this week, whatever. But it also implies to me, especially after I kind of vegged out on Marshall McLuhan as well, and he was a media theorist from the 50s who talked about how these electronic medias change the mind and the brain, and starting with how English is a language of aggression, you know, just the way that it's constructed, you know, how it flows is this, and then to have this very succinct mathematical aspect is very interesting, especially looked at anthropologically. Like I said, I don't look at it through the lens of resistance, because then I'm drawing on one set of variables and not all the variables, right? So it was him who stated that the English language was distinct from other languages. Others, when a thing is drawn, that thing means something, and there's a relationship in the mind with that form, the way that it's drawn. The English language, none of the letters mean anything. So if I say C, now I could be saying SEE, which is now you envision seeing, or it could be the letter C, which means nothing, unless it's like an initial for someone's name or something. But if I add an A to it, now you start seeing California, you know, that kind of thing. Now you add a T, boom, now it's an animal. You get rid of the T, add an R, oh, now it's some type of thing to drag around. Oh, add the T back in, oh, now you add an R, it's a vehicle. Add a T, it's a thing you put behind the vehicle. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's just super modular. It's like a 26-bit programming language, right? So, which speaks very interestingly to this, how effective it is at getting people to believe stupid shit.
Yeah.
It's very easy to construct anything that can be constructed with words and get someone to create a vision in their head of it, and to then act out this drama that has been constructed, you know. So I find that interesting. Yeah. I choose not to find it it's horrible. No, that's not interesting to go into that state. That's just anxiety. I find it interesting, and then to deconstruct it away from that, to separate the rhythmic aspect of the relative values of those letters, and to abstract them into a musical construct and to explore it there. You know, what does your name mean when it sounds like, you know, it's like, I think the brain will very easily assign meaning to that will be distinct from someone saying that. You know, like I'm saying the word onyx, but if I or something, you know, it won't sound like that. But you know, but let's say that was the sound of, you know, that the brain will latch onto that and build a new kind of context around this 26-bit programming system.
That's interesting. I'm excited at the way you think of resistance electronically. So this is what I've been trying to explore, because where I come from, I see how people set up systems that regulate power or the flow of power, you know.
And they use words to do it.
Yeah.
Increasingly English words.
Yes. So it's interesting to just shift from that idea of resistance and think of it electronically and what that means, you know. And I'm also excited because it seems like you think more in an integrated way, you know. So one thing I've always been curious about when I was thinking through your work is there's a lot of math, science, culture, music in what you do. You know, how does that work out for you?
Well, you know, I spent, I mean, the tool that helped me kind of program this state is the internet. You know, I've had a lot of time to I lived in Berlin for a while, and it was a time when I could examine my own blackness in isolation without people's opinions. You know, because in other places, whatever I do is a black thing. So it's like, okay, cool, that's a good place to start. And then to be able to play with my own assumptions and other people's assumptions, and it helped me to kind of form a space for myself that I constructed myself in a way that I feel I could still integrate new information to a model that will accept it, and it won't break. The model won't break down just because I have some new information. I feel like I have a model now that when new information is introduced, the model can accept it and evolve to deal with it, right? So myth construction is kind of a, you know, Sun Ra always, he harped on that, and he reinforced it with his music, so it was very resonant, so it made me pay attention. And because they made so many albums, you know, it's like they really kind of recorded a kind of they recorded a memory of the thing they were creating through time. So you felt when the synthesizer was introduced, you felt when it started becoming more Space is the Placey, and then more Egyptian-y, and then, you know, back into a kind of Freddie Henderson tribute thing. You know, these are just flows that I felt from like studying what I could get online chronologically, right? So he was very big on myth. It was very crucial, you know, that to me myth is the story that you tell to get the point across, you know, to have a simple reference that once you look into it more and more, complexity emerges, you know, like the Osirian myths and things like that. And so I started thinking about this. Now, I also read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell, Jeff Jarvis, you know, Tim Ferriss, I mean, this is a specific type of study specifically about the internet, not a totality of the things I've read. I'm talking specifically about internet stuff, which also speaks to the myth building modality, which is how we do it, and is exceptionally powerful now with all the mediums that exist now. So, for instance, it's like I look at, I just scan, what movies are in the theaters, and then just count how many posters you have somebody with a gun in their hand. You see? So it's like, that's a myth that gets constructed. Make America Great Again, that's a myth. 4 simple words build this whole complex picture that speaks to whatever you want it to speak to, right? So it's interesting. I found it interesting, like with my own identity. I've been Onyx Ashanti for 25 of 47 years, right? And it came to me after the Rodney King verdict came down, and that was when I first realized, oh wait, this isn't what I thought it was. There's something going on here, because if that doesn't get someone arrested, then I am not aware of all the rules of the game that are being played around me, right? So, and that Onyx Ashanti thing in my own mind, just because those were the blackest things I could think of at that time. I was not versed in the complexities of African diasporic history. I was very pop culture centered, so I only knew of Onyx as a black stone and of a tribe called Ashanti.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And that was one that that came while I was asleep, but the next day it just felt very natural, and it builds a myth in my own head, let alone the myth that can then be projected out, right? And so I look at it programmatically, so I don't think about it in terms of, there are archetypes, but this one's a constructed one, and it's constructed from internet stuff. The Maker, cosplay, cyborg, cyberspace type movies, and Star Trek and Star Wars and Iron Man, and School Days, and it's like there's we're embedded in these myths, so we're having this conversation. So it's like I feel like when we do stuff in public, we're kind of answering a question that's been posed, in the collective consciousness. When someone does that thing, like, I bet I can do 3 flips, that kind of thing. So it's, it's like there's all these questions that you didn't know you were asking until like a comedian or someone who makes something answers it, and then you're like, and it gives you that thing, and that happens increasingly now. So the internet and VR and digital signal processing and all, this is the most incredible myth-making construct. And the thing is that if the myths are just for buying shit and imperial propaganda, that's effective too. Very, very, very effective. So there's a whole game that's just not being played with these technologies, and it has to be games.
And do you feel like you are contributing to that game and playing that game that you feel like it's not being played?
I feel I had to create a contextualization of what this is all about for myself, and I can give you the short version, which is that I am my ancestors. So I don't have to look back to some ancestors. All I have to do is let my intuition do what it's supposed to do, and that's my ancestors speaking. So, but I also look at it from the point, I built a belief construct that's based on polarity, and a polarity between the asking of the what if and memory to hold whatever experience happens from asking that question, and that everything is built on that. So in that sense, then I feel like the contribution is to be and to document. You see, that way it doesn't turn into, it's like, I don't care if anyone else wants to do it. It's not interesting. I'm just going to share it.
Yeah.
If they want to do it, I will document it. I will, I would love to have others explore this once I have it, there's a certain mathematical stability that it needs to have first. Because then when it has that, it'll be so easy to just drop into this thing and to be able to look at something and say, I see why you did that. I don't want it that way. And the programming system is open source. So it's like, and it's real time, it's pure data.
Yeah.
So you change something, it happens instantly. So if anything anybody doesn't like, it's all 3D printed. There's nothing here that's even real. There's nothing that's permanent. There's none of this. It's a bunch of pieces attached to me. And if one of those pieces breaks, I can change it. I can change all of them. So not everything is subject to change, just like reality.
So looking at your videos, it's clear that you are very generous with your process. You tell people exactly how you got there and how you make that. That's amazing, because most artists, especially if they are building something that's unique, that's not really been out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of secrecy around it.
Mm.
So I find that very fascinating too, that you very generous with.
Well, it's not altruism.
Okay.
It's literally still what would be, think about the questions that have to be asked to create a body-worn cybernetic system that is not militaristic, that feels good, that looks good in any dimension that you want to put it in, and is so, and is documented in such a way that anyone feels like they could make it, or at least are one person removed from someone who will help them or make it for them, so that it's a whole other language with that's increasingly, that movement thing, that, right? And that it can do all of these. There's a bunch of stuff now. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm programming into it that I'm not talking about yet. That's going to be some crazy shit. So it's just level. That's where the myth thing comes in. Like, you don't just, I construct the way that I release information about this. And it's the reason why I haven't released any of the designs yet, because this is a story that's being told, and part of that story is the construction. And then there's a point where all of that gets released online at a single, well, not at a single time, but in a short space of time where they can all be documented properly. But there's the videos and all the other stuff that support that. What was the purpose of this stage and this stage and this stage, right? So, it's once it's properly deployed, there should be stuff that happens almost instantly, and it should be really, really interesting to see what happens because there's a thing called the hand-brain connection. The hands are intimately tied to, they have like trunk lines straight to big chunks of the brain. Without our hands, I'm not saying people without hands, I'm saying beings without hands are different kinds of beings. Beings with hands are different kinds of beings. Our hands say as much and maybe more, and probably a lot more than our mouth. So that interaction with a person having themselves with something they can build for $100, that it's more about just, there is no, I mean, there's all of this when you want it to be, but then there's and that's just that's the initial state, you see. So it's like it's a design, it's like a design challenge. it takes on a lot of the stuff I've read about the network and communication systems built into African drumming, the hand-brain connection that basically states that that dexterous hands are indicative of a mind that is capable of continuous evolution. You know, these things, it's like deploying that should have a very interesting effect when it's deployed right. So I love seeing when you're seeing things that are related to this that are done differently. So there's already other projects that do other things that overlap with what this can do, but the deploying of it as free as possible is interesting. You know, if it can be deployed in a way where it overcomes an inbuilt mechanism to say, that's too technical, or I don't know how to, you know, that it's designed in such a way that it's like, there's a ritual. That's where the ritualization stuff comes in.
Nice. So I've got one more question. I'm curious to hear the way you describe this time that we're in, this pocket of time that we're in. What is this?
Okay, well, I have a belief construct that I created to help me to just kind of stay in the zone without having to believe anything that was going to be not useful, right? So the way it works is that there is an infinite possibility matrix. It's the simultaneity of all possible states. In this possibility matrix, there is a primal urge between novelty, the what if, and memory, conservation, right? So doing something and remembering it, right? So there is the way that you can interact with this simultaneity is that you have to have experience. You have to have an experience. Then all the possibility collapses down to this experience that you're having, and then that can be encoded into a memory matrix dimension. Whatever you want to call that memory matrix, you can call it Akashic Records, you can call it the ancestors, doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Memory matrix dimension, right? So then the human becomes this other type of being, which is what we are. I mean, and like I said, this isn't true. This is just useful and interesting to me. Subject to change and evolution. That we are a polarity between a self that is completely embedded in space-time, because in space-time you traverse space, it took time, and an experience happens in that time, right? So the space-time self needs to have an ego. So, you know, there's none of that collapsing the ego type shit. Just can't let it get it just can't let it convince you that this is all there is, right? So that ego is the thing that's like, it has to eat and sleep and do all the things that allow this party to keep going, right? It's the thing that's in space-time. Then there is the other self, and that self is a corporation of urges at the event horizon of the possibility matrix. So the possibility matrix is all possibility. It exists outside of time. So that self exists outside of time. The conduit between these two selves is the intuition. So when that self can see into the realm of possibility. And so the intuition is like, oh, let's go this way. You see? And sometimes the ego doesn't want to listen to that, and then stupid shit happens. Right? As long as that conduit is functioning well, interesting stuff happens. The way that happens is that in between that conduit, there is a buffer called a mind. And it's completely programmable. Completely. There is nothing that any human believe. A human can believe anything. Anything. So it's completely programmable. And so that's interesting, because it means that programmed properly, one can do anything. right? And that programming has to be a kind of self-programming. You know, the communal programming is I mean, you know, if it's something that the community does consensually with each other, then great. But the main programming should be oneself. Who am I? What am I? What is this about? What's going on? What am I trying to do? Why am I doing it? What is all of this? Why is all of this? How is all of this? What can I do in it? Why would I want to do it? That kind of stuff, right? So going back to that statement about Marshall McLuhan stating that we are now in kind of an era of sound, because information technology is not a linear text-based format like books. It is always on, always everywhere, like sound, right? So by interacting with the world using a kind of binary sound, it programs the perception to start noticing ever more complexity. And that by doing that, novelty can result much more easily. So, you know, that's the whole thing. And it's like, so with that, I look at this current moment as being ripe for exploration of novelty in a way that's very Rube Goldberg-esque, you know, where it's like you explore the complexity in the same way that, you know, like when you're 6 years old and you show your grandmother you can do a cartwheel or something. You know, it's like we do this for each other, and there's so much we can do that once you start exploring novelty as a polydimensional being, and that's not like, of course it's made up, but so is everything else. Everything's made up. So just making up some shit that's actually useful and interesting, that's what I see right now, and it's resonant and it's exponentially evolving all around us. And so having a way to interface with CRISPR technology, with blockchain technology, with all of these things, and all the stuff that doesn't exist yet, and all the stuff that can exist, once someone is like, oh, you know, because I mean, yeah, we get you know, varying little perspectives on that, you know, from capitalism or Marxism or some other ism. Those are primitive forms. If you were to, they would not last. They would be very monotonous as a sound construct. You see, because they need to be monotonous to kind of lull you into staying within the confines of those systems. You see? So it's like, once it's, you know, I mean, that's how I look at my moment that's happening right now.
Makes sense.
Program myself, and then whatever, if it's working, it should be obvious. I shouldn't have to say it in English, increasingly.
Yes, and on that note, I want to ask you to, because I'm thinking of a sound.
Mm-hmm.
When we introduce your part in the film, that could sort of like introduce what you're doing. Is there a sound that you can share with us? That we could
Okay.
use.
Let's see.
Dylan, I don't know if that mic would be sufficient to record a sound that we might use as part of that soundtrack.
Well, okay, if it doesn't work on that, then I have
Sure.
Oh, don't worry. This speaker sounds good. Although I wish I did have a stereo feed, because the stereo feed is much. It's a very polarized sound. It bounces back and forth between the speakers, so it doesn't sound the same. So you'll have to check. But I mean, this sound particularly comes across very well. I kind of, yeah. Listen.
things are working.
Yeah. I only just started doing that today. I was like, I can sit over on the couch and work from there. I have a better, a bigger projector, both of which were gifts. But I have a better projector, but this one works, and it's not using as much juice.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
I think we got a lot.
Yeah, I figured.
I'm actually starting to think that maybe we might. I think I'll give you the raw footage of this, but I'm tempted just to make a film just for this conversation that we've had, because I think there's a lot in there that.
I'll tell you that right now I'm here for basically I'm doing this thing where I feel like this seasonal cosmic thing actually works. So I was in Red Door for the winter.
Yes.
January, February. Well, I was there from like late November, but like an official kind of boom, December 21st to March 21st.